it's sort of a theme song. A little different, guys. This is Mitch Hampton, Journey of an Aesthete podcast, episode 7, the last episode on Hannah Arendt's Life of the Mind. Well, thank you, Peter. It's great people come out like Peter, and I'm gonna talk a little bit. Well, this is gonna be a little different than the other episodes, so you'll see why in a second. Take it a little longer than usual, but so I should be able to talk all throughout this. Can figure here. Okay. We had to reconfigure some things there, and today we're going to look at some clips. This is again, as I've been saying, the 7th episode, Life of the Mind, and I want to say a few comments up front, if I may, about the ability to do 7 episodes on one book. This is the book. We're doing volume 2, Willing, but it's in two volumes. We got Willing, we got Thinking, and I thought it'd be fun to play some clips, if that's, possible. Kind of like, how when you present programs a little bit, here we go. I'm going to start with the clips and then end the episode with reading from her text, of course, to conclude. And the first clip, so this is interesting. In 2013, Margaret von Trotta made a movie called Hannah Arendt. And the movie, there's a trend now I'm going to say a few words aesthetically about trends in I call it fictional dramatization. This almost dovetails with another kind of episode, the aesthetics episode. We've left behind book lunch entirely. I'll get to that. We've left behind book lunch entirely for the following 5 to 8 minutes. So there's a trend now, and this is a deep issue. I almost attempted to throw out Hannah Arendt and just do the episode now about this trend in genre and dramatic representation because it's so pervasive. There's a trend to recreate sort of the hits or hot moments or what we perceive to be important moments. Elvis and Priscilla, for example. You could call it docudrama, you could call it costume drama, recreations of classic novels, etc. And this thing was already big. So I remember 20 years ago, I was kind of sick of this a little bit because there was so much of it. At that time, my interest was in much more unusual cinema, unusual, I don't know if the word's unusual, kind of off the beaten path television. And I just wasn't really interested at that time, with some important exceptions, in, costume pictures. And there were important exceptions, like I really liked, I'm very interested in representations of the 1970s. And so I was, of course, very excited about the Ice Storm going way back into the 90s. And then Boogie Nights, of course. And TV shows that might have taken place then. Well, this movie takes place in the 60s, of course. And now the trend is kind of the advice they give writers out there, from what I understand, is don't do an entire biography. Even with hundreds of episodes, don't do a complete life. You do sort of an important moment. And Margaret von Traut is a great German filmmaker, new German cinema, and her moment she chose was the reaction to, Ice Storm's a good film, the reaction to the Eichmann in Jerusalem, New Yorker piece. And so I thought it'd be fun. I'm gonna show a couple of clips from this film. Now, I was really torn, I wanted to show the pool room scene of Mary McCarthy and Hannah Arendt just playing pool and talking about, I don't know, their past love life or politics or gossip or something. I love that scene. It's exactly the kind of scene in Traut's film that no one would ever show or think important. They're going to show that, like, we're going to see important moments of students confronting her offended journalists and her going to Israel and all that. Of course, they're going to show all that. But I was, in my supposedly perverse alternative, contrarian tendency, I was just going to show them playing pool. But then I thought, that's not quite fair. I should really show something of a, of the context. And also, Margaret von Traut is a filmmaker. This is Barbara Sokowa and Janet Retier. I don't know off the top of my head the actor playing William Shawn. I hope I have the right clip, but I was going to show a little bit of this. This is a fictional, dramatic representation of a famous person. In this case, the author of this book we've been reading all these months. This goes back to the winter. I started this in the winter. I mean, I have to think about it now. It's a lot. We've done a lot, right? So this is episode 7, last episode. And so I thought, well, let's see what happens here. I don't know. And I should say, this is the Copyright Act of 1976. It's a fair use act. Fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and education, which is what we're all doing here. And so hopefully this will fly and not get taken down. And I do apologize for, not sticking to the text and showing little surprises. So, and it may not. This is just so. That's Barbara Sokowa playing Hannah Arendt. Now, this may not be the right scene. Although there's no bad scene from this film. But see, she's sitting down to write. Now, this is an interesting thing. She's writing Eichmann in Jerusalem, right?
Ignoriert sie einfach. You drive yourself crazy. Dafür ist Sean's
yeah, this is, I knew. So, that's it, her husband, Heinrich Blucher. Yeah, I don't think this is the right. Here's the pool scene. I didn't want to show the pool scene, but this is the pool scene. Here we are.
You can't do that. You have to follow the rules.
Oh, why? Nobody else does.
What do you want me to discuss? There has not been one single critique of what I actually wrote.
Did you really have no idea there would be such a furious reaction? Oh, Hannah, not even a little? You did take a certain tone, not the usual one.
That's the tone I was talking about.
It's quite normal.
The tone.
Well, for you, yes.
Stun-
No one's
tone.
ever dared to be the least bit ironic about this situation.
You are trying to distract me.
Oh.
See?
Oh.
I'm telling you, it is useless. I'm sure half of them hasn't even read the book.
Exactly. And that is why you should speak publicly about it. Yes, expose their hypocrisy, force them to a real discussion.
I refuse to explain myself to these dimwits.
So, this is a representation of this.
Im stummen Dialog mit mir selbst, I am alone.
I have a very good memory.
Ja.
Terrible accent.
In the silent dialogue with myself, I am alone. This she's quoting. So why am I playing this scene? She's quoting what would be Life of the Mind, which is the very text that Mary McCarthy worked on. I should say that's Janet McTeer, the great British actress, great German actress, Barbara Sukowa. She's playing McCarthy, of course, and they're kind of shooting the breeze, as they used to say.
If I win, do you promise to answer me a terribly personal question?
Here we go.
You won't win.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I can promise you anything.
So, was he the greatest love of your life?
Who?
You know, your secret king of sinking.
No, it was not. That is Heinrich.
All right then, fill in the blank. Heidegger was the greatest in my entire life. Oh, come on, I won't tell.
So this is a representation of two women talking, and so Mary McCarthy wants to know how she feels about Heidegger, right? Versus her current husband. And Hannah Arendt gives the proper response, where Heinrich, my current husband, of course, and so I'm totally uninterested in the content of this scene. By which I mean the fact of the matter of, did this conversation take place? The content of the conversation. In other words, paradoxically, I'm thoroughly in love with this scene and everything about it, because it's a vision of cinema in which the relationships between people is the only damn thing that matters. And that interests me. I'm not saying that's the only thing that interests me, but it's underrated, I think. And so this pool scene is going to get lost in the shuffle, and they're going to show the scene where she talks to the class and she confronts reporters, the more supposedly important scenes from the film. But this is the two women talking about, who is this man to you? It has nothing to do with the book we're reading.
There are some things that are stronger than a single human being.
And did you read the book? You read it?
And these are the people arguing.
Show up.
They're fighting. So I just wanted to get a taste of this one strange oddball scene in a pool hall. In a pool, playing pool. Mary McCarthy and Hannah Arendt playing pool. Just for fun. What I was saying is that's of course a matter for enacting and drama, but so I'm not so interested in. I mean, I misspoke. I'm a little bit interested. I mean, I've read all the books on Arendt and I've read all the letters to Heidegger and Karl Jaspers. So clearly I'm interested in her relations to these people, these men. And the nature of those relationships, you know, were they intimate? Were they just professional? Were they this? Were they that? And those things, of course, do matter to me, but it's sort of like they matter. They're like here, you know, they're like, they matter, they're like here. And the kind of stuff, and above that is, this is very hard to articulate. This is that material. Above that, in a hierarchical fashion, is Margaret von Trotta as a filmmaker doing this scene and the actors. In terms of I'm much more interested in that. Above both those things. So that 1, 2, above, even higher than that, are all the things I've gleaned reading all these letters and all the things that was said by Heidegger and by Jaspers and by, I mean, George K. Tipp has a long piece on Hannah Arendt. He was a guest on our podcast, and in his piece, you know, he goes into great detail about Hannah Arendt's spiritual beliefs, such as they were. And very interesting. I'm interested in that more even. And I'm interested in this book. So in a weird sort of way, I'm excited about this book. I'm excited about this movie and the fact that it's a well-done representation of a period of time of the 60s and these people, famous people. But, you know, and I sort of, you know, it's the phrase is it's an accomplished fact. It's an accomplished fact that she, as a young girl student, had an affair with Heidegger. It's an accomplished fact that Mary McCarthy worked on this book. Those are things that are already in the world. You can't go back and make it a different world. You can't make a world in which Heidegger never made really awful decision to become a Nazi. We can't make the Heidegger we want. So he was just a nice, like Albert Camus, or like Jasper's a nice academic who just lived. No, he's guilty. That's a stain on his, you know. So that's the world. The objective facts of the world of who he was. He also wrote Being in Time, which I think everybody should read. So that's complicated too, right? This guy has awful politics, but he wrote a great book. What do you do about that, right? So, you know, there's almost nothing to be done. So any event, that's my kind of a polemical discussion of that question. And I didn't mean to go off onto a tangent and talk about, well, costume drama, comedy, costume periodization. It's my least favorite films and TV things that are made or like that, actually, with some exceptions. This might be one exception. But it is pervasive. People hunger. And sort of the rule, what is the rule that you show? I think it's that Quentin Tarantino interview where Tarantino said, if I were doing an Elvis movie, he never has. We were stuck with the Boz Lerman picture, alas and alack. It was him that we was paid to do it and not. The best is John Carpenter's film with Kurt Russell. If we're talking about films about Elvis Presley, that's just the best one from 1979. Then the other one that's really great, of course, is Priscilla from last year from Sofia Coppola. I'm strange. I like those interpretations. But what I'm saying is that when Tarantino was interviewed, said, Tarantino, if I were making a movie about Elvis, I would just shoot him going to this record studio, Sun Records, and recording those songs. And just be like that day or those 2 days. Again, you don't show, the trend now is to not show the entirety of a person's life, but to show little moments, right? And that's just a trend now. That's what's in fashion, is his Tarantino's advice. I don't know. Is that better than something else? I mean, if it were up to me, if I were a dictator, we'd have far less of all these movies and TV shows, actually, just because a lot of it to me is not very interesting. But, you know, that's okay. I'm going to see what we got here. Oh, boy. right now, I'm in the middle of watching Cobra Kai. That interests me. Because Cobra Kai is about the Karate Kid series. And it's actually looking back to the early 80s or mid 80s. And it takes place today, but on Netflix. And so that's kind of interesting. That too is the same as what we just watched. It's like, you're portraying these characters through time, and you're trying to I don't know. Oh boy. I have to go to my playlist, and I have to find, because it's bear with me here. All right, what do we got here? Hannah Arendt. So this is from the Dick Cavett Show, and this is Mary McCarthy and Duke Ellington.
One thing, Mr. Ellington, you were quoted
The only reason I'm playing this
at the White House
is because Duke Ellington's in it, not because of Mary McCarthy. I'm just being honest, It's an excuse to get.
You said you quoted Billy Strayhorn, who died about a year ago and was your colleague. Could you do that thing
Well, it
for
had
us?
to do
You
with
did that?
freedom.
Yes.
Yeah, well, the subject was, it just sprang from the Freedom Medal, which the president presented me with. And on the subject of freedom, by coincidence, there is a number in our sacred concert, which is called Freedom, and it's about 20 minutes long. And the big payoff statement at the end is what I say about the way Billy Strayhorn lived. Billy Strayhorn was my writing and arranging companion for 30 years, And I always say Billy Strayhorn lived with four major moral freedoms. Freedom from hate unconditionally. Freedom from self-pity. Freedom from fear of possibly doing something that might help someone else more than it would him. And freedom from the kind of pride that could make a man feel that he was better than his brother.
Very good.
Good.
Yes.
That's Mary McCarthy there. I should say that having a show where Mary McCarthy and Duke Ellington are hanging out, and Ellington goes into this long sort of polemical speech about the four freedoms and the fears and from the early 70s is exciting. That's why I'm showing it. But just to give you a taste, this is the same era as when this book was written. Eras are important. We're kind of
It's better than something I'd ad lib. Miss McCarthy, do you like Norman Mailer?
Yes, I do, and he has attacked me.
He did, didn't he?
Yes.
I saw that. I read a file of things about you. And he said something like, when all is said and done, our Mary is a bit of a duncy broad. Do you remember that?
I didn't remember those words, thank God.
Those were the ones. What is a duncy broad? And would you have called him that if you had the chance? I mean, something similar? That was in a review of the group.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that was a review that hurt me.
Did it?
The Mailer review, because some parts of it were so acute, and it was the most intelligent review of the group. Almost every other one was stupid. Both.
This is really interesting. So Mary McCarthy is saying that, and again, this is a world that's not our world. This is a world in which one of the biggest authors, Mary McCarthy, a woman, wrote a book called The Group, and her consciousness is such that she can, at the same time, she does not like Norman. She hates Norman Mailer as much as all the feminists in that Town Hall film. It's a Pennebaker's film Bloody Town Hall with Germaine Greer and Betty Friedan and Jill Johnston, where they attacked Norman Mailer. And Norman Mailer was famous for being male chauvinist pig, a sexist, etc. He flaunted that, he performed that was his thing. But she's at one at the same time holding the accurate judgment that Mailer's got problems as a person. He's not a great person. Yet, she says, when he criticized me, he did it with intellect and intelligence. It's that. So what I'm saying is that what I'm trying to say is that Mary McCarthy, the thinker and the writer, I mean, that's something. And so she's able to, and then later on, you know, Dick Cavett asked her, what are you reading right now for enjoyment? And she says, I'm reading Jude the Obscure for Pleasure by Thomas Hardy. She could have said a lot of things. This is 1972, I don't know. She could have said Armies of the Night. No, that's a little earlier, but I don't know off the top of my head all the big releases of 72, 70. I don't know, but you know, that's television in the early 70s. I'm gonna leave it there a little bit. Well, no, I'm gonna hold on. Say working the thing here. Now this is Hannah Arendt talking to German and French television audience.
Que pensaient les pères fondateurs? Ils pensaient s'être libérés d'abord de la domination de la majorité. C'est pourquoi ce serait une grave erreur de penser que ce que nous avons est une démocratie. Ce que nous avons ici.
This is Hannah Arendt being interviewed about the American system. And she's basically talking about, you know, we're a republic and not a democracy, which is a common thing. Which I think this is a long, I'm not going to play, I just want to get a taste of her talking. Actually, this is the same year, again, this is all the same period. This is, you know, same year. And she goes into a long thing about what the Constitution is, the Declaration of Independence, and how, you know, at that time, you know, they talk a lot about Watergate, of course, and Nixon and the abuses of at that time. And she says that, you know, you need to, the thing that the framers, Constitution, we're most worried about is the oppression, being oppressed by the majority and defending minority rights. And of course, what we all know that's interesting is now it's reversed, and we're now threatened by, you know, sometimes a fascistic minority, you know, right, that wants to. So it's again, things flip-flop through history and they change from decade to decade. And that's kind of thing, so majority, minority. But, you know, it's important to remember that Hannah Arendt was a political philosopher and a constitutional scholar as well. People don't talk about that so much. I mean, she was into everything. And that was just that's not really the...
C'est un système.
And in different colors. But if we come to these general questions, what...
That's my door. Of course, someone's at the door. This is kind of an interesting stream. What's up? You weren't supposed to come to that. In the middle of doing a live radio show. You were supposed to come on Monday, I think, or Tuesday. So yeah, I'm sorry. Can we reschedule later, or what should we do? I don't know. What can you do? I'm live right now. That's why I'm not talking very well. I'm in the middle of doing a live show, live broadcast. So, what's the date? What day works for you? Okay, thank you. My apologies. Okay, thank you. All right. All right. That was that was the well. I'm having work done on my heater, and they were not supposed to come today. They were supposed to come another day, but they didn't get the memo, or they didn't. So it's been quite a week for me. So Let's get a taste of her talking.
Is also proper à notre époque. Is
Ce qui est également propre à notre époque, c'est l'intrusion massive de la criminalité dans la vie politique.
criminality into political processes. And by this,
Je veux parler ici de quelque chose qui dépasse de loin ces crimes, que l'on cherche toujours à justifier par la raison d'État, en prétextant que ce...
So she basically is talking about, Watergate and how crime, the rationalization of state crime, and the phrase is reason of state, that it somehow needs to be done. That's her perspective in that moment. Today, I would say very different things. In other words, these aren't. She's responding to a particular moment, and I said the moment then was, she talked about how the framers were concerned about the minority being oppressed. Minority. They didn't think of that a minority could be people that want to outlaw contraception, or a minority of people that want to make the United States a religious country. That is a minority view, but that is a view. And so now the concern is to defend ourselves against that minority. That's not the majority. The majority wants no part of that. But this is a tricky thing, right? In democracy. So again, we took a little detour into Hannah Arendt's politics, and away from pure philosophy there. So this is the book. You can see her at the end there. Got my glasses. All right. This is the very end of the book. And she's talking about freedom, as Duke Ellington discussed freedom there, and is, All right. Such reflections may yield various hypotheses, and some may even turn out to yield knowledge when tested. In any case, their quality and weight will depend on the cognitive achievements of their authors. So she's talking about, she goes on to say what she's talking about in this next following sentence. Still, it is hardly deniable that the reflections of the great founders of modern science, Einstein, Planck, Bohr, Niels Bohr, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, have brought about a crisis in the foundations of modern science and their central question. What must the world be like in order that man may know it? Is as old as science itself, and it remains unanswered. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. Bear with me, I'm trying to find. She's talking about what different people think at the time. So Hegel's world spirit has recently found materialization in the construction of a nervous system fashioned on the model of a giant computer. Lewis Thomas proposes to understand the worldwide community of human beings in the form of a giant brain, exchanging thoughts so rapidly that the brains of mankind often appear functionally to be undergoing fusion. With mankind as its nervous system, the whole earth thus becomes a breathing organism of finely meshed parts, all growing under the protective membrane of the planet's atmosphere. She's quoting Lewis Thomas there. Not her. Most of that was Lewis Thomas, The Lies of a Cell. Do you know that book? Science, anyhow. But then she goes on to comment on what she just quoted. And she's pretty harsh. Hannah Arendt, her tone, right? But I welcome it. We welcomed it in these 7 episodes. Here it is. Such notions are neither science nor philosophy, but science fiction. They are widespread and demonstrate that the extravagances of materialist speculation are quite equal to the follies of idealist metaphysics. She's saying they're both mistaken. The metaphysic folks and the materialists are both mistaken. She's what she's saying. The common denominator of all these fallacies, whether materialist or idealist, apart from being historically derived from the notion of progress, that's capitalized, and its concomitant, the undemonstrable entity called mankind, is that they fill the same emotional function. In Lewis Thomas's words, they do away with the whole dear notion of one's own self, the marvelous, old, free-willed, free enterprising, autonomous, independent, isolated island of itself, unquote, which is, quote, a myth. The proper name of this myth, this is now Arendt, not Thomas, the proper name of this myth, which we are admonished from all sides to get rid of, is freedom. So she's saying, you know, trying to find another. Let's read the last paragraph. This is, again, it was going to be many more, but she died, so we didn't get to it. I am quite aware that the argument, even in the Augustinian version, is somewhat opaque, that it seems to tell us no more than we are doomed to be free by virtue of being born. No matter whether we like freedom or abhor its arbitrariness, are pleased with it or prefer to escape its awesome responsibility by electing some form of fatalism. This impasse, if such it is, cannot be opened or solved except by an appeal to another mental faculty, no less mysterious than the faculty of beginning, the faculty of judgment, an analysis of which at least may tell us what is involved in our pleasures and displeasures. So that's the last thing she wrote. She's preparing us. I'm going to write this book on judgment. It's going to be the shortest book. She never got to it, but we have that paragraph. And, you know, she's saying freedom is real. I'm being told by all these people. She's very critical. Look, Lewis Thomas, you probably, if you went to school, had to read Lewis Thomas, The Lies of His Cell, in undergraduate science. You know, he's a pretty heavy hitter, cat. But she's saying he's wrong. She's saying Lewis Thomas's dream of an interconnected whole, she's saying, I don't know. It makes one wonder what she would think of the internet. She probably would not be so keen on it, I suspect. But I don't know. It's really been, I should say, it's been a real treat to go through these two books with you here and show some of these clips. And this will be the last time for a while that I do multiple series on just one book, but I feel was called for given the nature of her text, right? And the next book we're going to do, of course, is Annie Dillard, American Childhood. Interestingly enough, it's one of my ideas is to immerse myself in things I do not know or understand. Because I'm an adult student. I'm a middle-aged student. Thank you, Yvette. Thanks, everybody. Immerse myself in things I don't understand. Things I don't know. So in American Childhood, I'm not a woman who grew up in the 50s, first of all. That is not me in any way, shape, respect. So that's a difference. I'm not Annie Dillard. I didn't grow up in Pennsylvania like she did. I didn't grow up in that kind of wealthy family, which she did grow up in Pennsylvania. and probably, so I misspoke. It isn't about not understanding. It's somebody whose life is utterly unlike my own. That's not the only reason for art, but that's one of the chief reasons, is to experience things unlike ourselves so that we can learn. And so I'm not really that much like Annie Dillard. And my sensibility's not like Annie Dillard, actually. As I'm reading this book, she doesn't like the modern world. I love the modern world. That's another difference. She's like a little kind of ecological environmentalist. I'm out on civilization, which is a little bit of a paradox given that she grew up in the cradle. Her wonderful family life was made possible by the very modern things that she excoriates, right? Like you get to that a little bit. But she's a wonderful writer, and it's a way of writing, kind of a personal writing, different than what we've been reading with Hannah Arendt, and right on the edge between fiction, prose, and nonfiction, biography, memoir, all of these things which I'm interested in. So we will do that in September. Thanks for coming out. We've had I think 1,000 people watching this, which is really something. I should say things about Hannah Arendt and what I think about her in this book now, which I will do before I say goodbye. What do I think about her project in these books? I'm going to take a drink of coffee and say something about it. So I like that Arendt is saying, in a sense, none of the above. We've got the scientific materialists. We're a computer, the brain, all that. And then we have these metaphysical religious traditions. She's saying this even though she does love Augustine. She's saying, well, she can't. She's saying that both are, in a sense, wrong. She's trying to find her own path in these texts. Her own, I think, idiosyncratic, but I would say it's idiosyncratic, personal, but applicable to many of us wandering around people. Her comments on American democracy were true in the early 70s. That was the problem then, is the problem of, again, the oppressive majority. We call it the white male, whatever, majority at that time. And Nixon and the Nixon White House, And so she was understanding that the founders, independent judiciary, rule of law, not men. You don't want to have a cult of personality where men rule you. So I agree with Hannah Arendt in her respect for the American way of democracy, actually. She came to live here, so she liked things about it, clearly. At the same time, she loved the student movement. She liked both, and that's interesting. So I do agree with Hannah Arendt about freedom, and I do agree with her that, none of the above, that, you want to take a little bit from this, a little bit from that, and combine them and see what you can do with it, and the freedom to do that, rather than signing on totally to one view. She doesn't want to sign on with the scientists totally, and she certainly doesn't want to sign on with even her own religious tradition totally. She wants that freedom, and she thinks that freedom is a real thing. And she's skeptical about attempts to prove that freedom's unreal, that it's a myth or a fallacy or an illusion, or she's saying there's something in freedom. And to get a little more contentious, I think there's some insight into the nature of evil and the banality of evil. I do think that many times, not always, but many times, people have done the worst things, not from inner passion or even drive, but following orders. I think that has happened. I think there is a little bit of that. And I do think that, there's a long lecture in this film that's represented in the Hannah Arendt film, where Barbara Sukowas playing Hannah Arendt says, the problem for human beings now is not feeling needed and feeling superfluous, like they don't matter. She's right about that. In fact, that's become much more of a problem in the past 30 years, 40, 50 years, than when she was discussing that, of being superfluous, or people feeling they don't matter. And all the harm that can do, and people feeling that they're superfluous and they don't matter, that could drive them into really awful reactions. And so there's a lot of wisdom in that. I have not spoken in this series about things I don't like in Arendt. We could do a whole series on all of her flaws and all of her mistakes. They're there. She's not a saint. She's not, perfect. I don't agree with her politically a lot. I mean, for one thing, I'm a liberal, and she's on record saying I can't sign on to liberalism. Well, sorry. She's a bundle of influences, and that's the Heidegger in her, and that's the suspicion of liberal democracy, that liberal democracy is insufficient, unfulfilling. And again, was friends with Walter Benjamin and the Marxists, so maybe I think a little bit of that European Marxism. And the continental tradition of Kant, and then her lover, teacher, Heidegger, all those things rubbed off on her, were part of her. And those parts of Hannah Arendt, I don't accept. And that's fine, that's okay, Others, contemporaries, might think that's the most exciting, interesting part of her, the part of her that loved the student movement or was excited about the student movement. That's fine. It's not, see, again, as I said in the outset of this episode, I have layers of interest. I'm interested in Margaret von Trotta directing those two actors in that pool. And I'm interested in those women talking about their love life and who's the man you love the most. I'm interested in the intimacy of that scene more than I'm interested in, I don't know, necessarily the details of what they're speaking about, say. And I'm interested in this book. I'm interested in that this person wrote this book and what we can get from that in reading it. Much more interested in that than, I don't know, than whether Hannah Arendt's somebody to follow or not. No, I mean, follow her in some things, don't follow her in other things, like most, Hopefully we're not, all or nothing people. Hopefully we take from, and also the nature of her genius, I think, and this is going to sound even more strange, and I'm thinking out loud now, it's often the case that the more brilliant or more accomplished a person, maybe the more flaws, the more reason you would not want to follow them entirely. It's exactly the opposite of what you would expect. You would expect the best person, you would, if somebody's the best, you're going to have less to criticize. No. Maybe it's the nature of someone like a Hannah Arendt that because she's so intelligent and so accomplished, that there might be more mistakes in her and more blind spots in her. Just, again, I don't know. I'm thinking it's possible. I know that's contrary to what we might think, but yes. It's almost like it's like this more and more. You have more virtues and more vices at the same time, and she was right about Richard Nixon and Watergate, but I shudder. I don't know if I want to know what Arendt would say today. I might agree with her, might not. I don't know. But I certainly can't agree with her rejection of liberalism because I am a liberal. Then on the other hand, liberalism might die and be replaced by something else. I don't know. They'll call it something else. Maybe it'll live. It's worth defending, of course, but it'll be replaced. They'll call it communalism or something, or I don't know. But that doesn't mean I'm not gonna I'm always going to accept an independent judiciary. I'm always going to accept law and not man, not person. The law is above the person. You don't want to worship your politician. You want your politician to, be a regular person who just does their job, and you don't want them into a rock star. You don't want, unfortunately, we've had, it's been very different. We seem to want our public servants, officials to be rock stars and be outlandish and be, sexy and exciting, but not necessarily competent. So, our priorities, I would say our priorities had been a little bit askew, but hopefully that's changing now. I don't know. This is not a political podcast, and I'm not one to pontificate on what I think necessarily, although to say that I would love to be able to argue with Hannah Arendt now and say, Arendt, I can anticipate every possible objection you have to liberalism, but I would say to her, Winston Churchill, what are the replacements, Look at the replacements. How awful many of them have been, some of which you analyzed and discovered yourself. So it's interesting. So her uncompromising tone, her none of the above quality can be frustrating, can be exasperating. But it's also why it's also why we should read her, and why Hannah Arendt and not someone else. So thank you for Life of the Mind and Book Lunch, and we will return in September with Annie Dillard's An American Childhood, which is a Pennsylvania childhood in the 1950s. It's not every American childhood at all times and all places, so it's an interesting piece of writing, book about a certain period of time, a certain woman, and I really look forward to that, to get into that. And I think we're just going to do one episode on that. And so have a great weekend, and apologize for the technical difficulties, but we made it through them. Thank you.